we go back to all of that amazing feedback from our staff in the scanning phase and go, all right, in relation to student behaviour, we've heard you've talked about the inconsistency. We're going to streamline and systemize our approach to student management across the school. So we're sort of satiating a bit of a need for some of our how staff, the ones who don't actually just love a vision statement. I love getting caught up in the emotion of a vision statement, but not everybody does. Some of our more analytical thinkers want to know how we're going to do that. So again, we outline that for them. So that's a second term of work. That's a very in-depth process that we do inside the partnership program. And then when we've got that clear, our staff know that we're serious. We're committing to something, but also they're hearing those gentle expectations and standards. So this is a bit preventative here, in a sense where we start to talk about what's everybody's part in this. We go, oh, right. So our leaders are saying that in order for this to happen, our staff have to actually follow those student behaviour management frameworks. They need to contact home or maintain those relationships with families, let's say. So we're starting to send a message, but it also is giving a little bit of a lay of the land and something to anchor to in possible future conversations, which might be corrective or coaching or even celebratory for our staff.
Adrienne Hornby, welcome to the Schoolyard Cast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here and finally get to chat somewhat face-to-face.
Somewhat face-to-face, yeah, that's right. It's I guess that we'll get into this later, of course, but during the pandemic and everything like that, this was oftentimes the only face-to-face option that was available there for a long time.
I know. I think it's wild that, I'll have coffee catch-ups with other people all over the country, and I'm like, we can just sit here in our own houses and catch up like we were meeting up down the road. So I still find it a great tool for us to be able to use sometimes.
Well, absolutely. And then I say that necessity is often the biggest defining driver of innovation, and for people, especially in schools and education and teaching, obviously, being forced in a situation where you still had to deliver education to students and things like that, people had to get used to the Zoom and Teams pretty quick, didn't they?
Well, I don't know whether they did get used to it. I think every time I join a call with a school, I laugh over the technical glitches that we still have on both sides. And I'm a bit of a troubleshooter on Teams and Zoom and Google, all of these things now. I'm like, press that little button down here. So we laugh every time.
I know, you have to wear so many hats these days. Just sitting in front of a computer, rarely you're able to open an email, type and send it off without some sort of glitch or some other responsibility coming up, that's for sure.
Listen, as we know in education, they've always been wearing a lot of hats. Before I left education, my principal wore what he said he hoped to be one of those final hats he'd ever have to put on was a rabbit catcher, when a 5-year-old packed their pet rabbit in a Woolworths bag and brought it to school. And he spent half his day in a suit trying to catch this rabbit. And he said, we really do cover so many roles. So I always think back to that.
Well, yeah, and that's right. And I guess like a quick story from mine as well is when I was in a consultancy call and I had to be cut short because the principal had to hop on the big rider mower and cut the grass for the next day's school athletics.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many hats. Now,
I love it.
We'll go straight into it. Can you elaborate on how wellbeing and effective strategies for schools are reflective of each other?
I think I always use the analogy that wellbeing is an absolute beast that it gets its tentacles into so many areas. So I think traditionally, or when wellbeing in schools really begun to emerge, we saw it, as the after work drinks or the morning teas or the ad hoc yoga sessions every now and then, or maybe like a staff shouted out, and it still is those things. But I found particularly now more so in my work getting into schools and really listening to leaders and staff that our well-being is impacted and affected by so many different challenges or aspects or parts of the job that it's really important for us to recognize that how we lead and the decisions that we make goes on to impact the well-being of our staff. What we have to realize is that our staff's well-being is impacted by so many different factors right across our school. So the things that cause stress or challenge related to their daily work, things that impact our morale, our levels of satisfaction, culture, our relationships, our ability to collaborate, communication barriers, how we optimize workload. So this is the elements, I guess, that I've been spending more of my time on lately, either having these conversations or educating leaders and staff in schools, but also diving into in the research. So I guess my roundabout way of answering that question is that it's really about seeing well-being as something outside of just our people's personal well-being and their mental health, but also linking it to the elements of their workplace well-being. So with that in mind, it's like I said, it's considering stresses and risks and how we acknowledge and address these, but also the things that we put in place in the workplace to enhance our staff's well-being. So the considerations that we make before we take on a new initiative or put in a new change management plan. It's our messaging. It's how we weave well-being into the daily work of a school that I think needs a whole reframe in this space, as opposed to seeing well-being as just an add-on or an extra chunks of time that we don't actually have. It's considering that every single decision that we make, every conversation that we have, every relationship that we build is linked to well-being in some way, because it can have an impact on all of those areas that link so closely with our general sense of wellness in our personal lives and at work.
Yeah, and you've raised many good points there, and leading directly into that, with you working across the varied operational layers of schools, you place great importance on data itself and, more importantly, staff voice, don't you?
Yeah, and that link to the data actually helped me to see what was really happening in schools. So I started this journey focused, I guess, more on well-being from a personal sense. And then when I got into schools, I started to hear just anecdotally that the message that I was talking about in relation to well-being, which was take better care of yourself and learn how to manage your emotions and build your resilience and ensure that you feel balanced when you turn up to work each day, didn't always land in some schools, because they go, well, that all sounds nice, but I feel really unsafe here, or we have just a crippling workload, or our leaders don't communicate with us about what's happening and we feel really misaligned. One leader saying this, another leader saying this. And then I thought to myself, okay, I really need to pinpoint here what's actually happening in each school, because this one generic cookie cutter workplace wellbeing workshop, or just even personal wellbeing workshop, wasn't really landing. So I was a real data nerd when I was in education and in schools. And I'm not saying I necessarily really knew stats or did data really well, but I was very fascinated by it, and all of my decision making, as well as my feedback, would lean somewhat on data. And so when I started to realize in schools that there were certainly nuances, I wanted to ensure that the approach to support staff or the learning provided to staff was speaking to their needs. So this was where I actually was invited to develop a staff wellbeing survey for one school. And my, I guess, knowledge around staff wellbeing surveys and great surveys and good questions really started to evolve from there. And so, I started off at this point developing this staff wellbeing survey, and it's changed over so many years. But really, this, I guess, at a ground level, when I first go to work for a school, gives me an idea of what's happening at this school. So first of all, how staff are faring, in relation to their well-being, to their burnout risk, to their perceptions of these things that I was discussing before around staff morale, their level of workplace satisfaction, their perceptions of staff wellbeing culture, whether they endorse their school. And those metrics gave me a little bit more of a strategic insight into what each and every school needs. So in some schools, for example, this data is really important because it shows that staff's personal wellbeing, they're really struggling with. So they might be really stressed, they're self-reporting burnout, that their mental health and wellbeing is being impacted. So that tells me two things. Well, it tells me many things, but the two most important things are, one, these staff are really struggling with their personal wellbeing, so they could do with some support in that space. Therefore, workshops or learning or strategies around resilience and managing themselves will be well received. But on the other hand, it might also be indicating that in relation to these areas of their workplace wellbeing, like morale and culture and satisfaction and key stressors, that maybe the initiatives that the school has put in place in the past for staff wellbeing might not be working, or the decisions that they're making in other areas is having an impact on their staff. So it enables us to be really strategic in our approach. The other part of that, beyond, okay, well, what do we do with that? And in consulting, we're really good. I particularly am really good at identifying what's going on and therefore what a school needs to do. That diagnostic side of it is, okay, well, then when we engage in this learning, and I'm going to use the example of with the leadership team around developing their leadership capacity, I say to them, in a general sense, let's be reflective. How do you think that we are managing our staff, or we are leading in a transformational leadership space? So that might be, for example, co-creating vision, distributing the leadership, developing our people. We have that strong sense of trust. They go, oh yeah, we think we're doing really well. And I'm like, well, let's come back to looking at some of your data here. In fact, a key or a large group of staff don't actually believe that vision is co-created, or they don't recognise a coaching and mentoring program. So that then gives us something to go, oh, okay, well, awareness is the first key to any change. So that's really helpful. But if I move then away from just diving in and fixing a problem, it also helps us to celebrate our strengths and the things that we're really good at and how we can leverage those to achieve more success in other areas. So it's pretty rare that a school will come to me and their data is just glowing from the beginning. There's always interventions or enhancements we can make. So I love it from that perspective because it helps us to be strategic, but it also helps us to build our awareness of ourselves, but also that external awareness, so how others are perceiving us, which is the beacon of all, true self-awareness, is to have both of those.
That's right. And then, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think you've happened across a very important point there, and that is perception, because I'm guessing if a new leader, be it from like outside of like a consultancy, for example, or a new headmaster, principal, something like that, comes in with a very much a transformational style of leadership where it's a strong vision and it has huge underpinnings on relying on the buy-in of staff and other employees to be motivated and believe in the vision and things like that. That in turn has a risk, if not managed properly, of really, really opening up the doors for burnout, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that it really helps us to build a bigger picture and see what we don't always want to see or are capable of seeing ourselves. So then I guess if I'm still on that concept of staff wellbeing survey data, I think it's great then to be able to repeat those surveys or capture that data again and really measure our success or progress to build that momentum to help us again pivot and focus on our next part of our inquiry into wellbeing. I always say to my schools, I'm really sorry, but wellbeing's like a whack-a-mole. You'll focus on something for a while and then you'll have to pivot and focus on something different really soon. And I mean, that's leadership. We're constantly having to evolve and adapt our leadership to cater to the new staff in the cohort, the students, the community, and so on. So I absolutely love surveys for that purpose, but a big part of my work is reviewing multiple data sets. So I think that one data set tells one story, and people are always different when they provide anonymous staff wellbeing survey data than what they would be in person, in a group, with individually one-on-one with their leader. To me, who's somebody who's impartial. So a big part of my approach is to collect and review multiple data sets. We call that the scan, to really ascertain how staff are faring, what it is that they need, and then again, what it is that they need from those priority areas. So honing down a little bit deeper.
Fantastic. No, that is a tremendous answer. And thank you very much for sharing your insight there, because that hit so many different multi-layers there that it could literally be a whole interview and a whole chat based on that, and might be something we could do. But
that's right. I can talk. I've got data coming out of my ears.
No, well, it's all useful data. That's the difference.
That's right.
That's right. Now, having founded Adrienne Hornby Consulting, can you please tell me more of the different kinds of surveys which you've alluded to there, but the different kinds of them and the following reports and the workshops that you also deliver to schools?
Yeah, so like I was telling you before inside my story, it didn't actually start out I didn't actually start out with staff wellbeing surveys. I initially started out just delivering workplace or personal wellbeing, workshops in schools. And that very quickly evolved, as I said, to recognising the need for schools to have more professional development opportunities in workplace wellbeing, more specifically in leadership that's, I guess, styles that are more conducive to wellbeing. What I'm mostly working in now in this space is my school partnership program. So our well-led schools partnerships, which span over a 12-month-ish period. So sometimes take about 12 months to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years, or schools just keep continuing getting me to come and work with them, which I absolutely love because I get to see their progress over a number of years. But that, I guess, is the holy grail of the services that I offer. But if I come back to these staff wellbeing surveys, there's the option for schools to have their own do-it-yourself staff wellbeing survey. So they can have a copy of ours on a Google form or a Microsoft form and repeat it year after year, tweak it, customize it, and do what they want with it. It comes with a full guide of how to implement. But then from there, which is what I love to do, there's the option of us actually analysing the data. So we've got two report options. One is a comparison report, which is where we actually compare your school's results with the like school and national averages within our data pool. So we're over 60 schools now, which I feel really proud to have worked with. As I said, it started off with just a couple of known schools in my networks, and now I'm working with schools right across the country and some internationally. So the comparison report is excellent because you can see every single question in the survey, around 60 questions, compared with those comparable averages. So you can really see, okay, is this something that's more unique to my school, or is this a challenge that many other schools are experiencing? So I might use the example of workload and staff perceptions of whether their workload is manageable. They might think that it's absolutely exuberant, but really it's kind of sitting where other schools are. And that doesn't mean that that's okay, but it helps us to quantify that maybe this is a system or a profession-based challenge versus a school-based challenge. So I love that comparison data because, again, like we were talking about, awareness is the first key to any change. It's great to be able to have a look at that and go, I'm going to use an example of a school I've worked with recently where a stressor related to communication between leaders and staff came out at 30%, almost double above that national and like school average. So I could say, I understand that you might think communication is a challenge across many schools, but this is well above those comparable averages. So it helps to bring a little bit of an understanding or reflection into, okay, maybe we do have to adapt or refine or audit what we're doing because our staff are really struggling in comparison to those other schools. But it also helps us to celebrate, I want to come back to those strengths. So when we're doing really well in comparison to those averages, and reflect on the fact that we've obviously put in place lots of things that have led to those strengths. So we can celebrate those too before we start thinking about the next strategic direction that we take to improve wellbeing and culture in other ways. And then further to that, then we go into our comprehensive report. So that's where we write a full comprehensive report on every single section of the survey. So there's 5, really diving into the literature linked to those areas. So if you might use staff satisfaction as one. So if it's flagging that staff are less satisfied than the averages, then an explanation of why staff satisfaction is really important for student outcomes. Again, it becomes a tool to be able to learn from, but then also includes a number of strategies and recommendations that the school could adopt based on research and evidence-based practices, but also linked back to staff feedback. So reviewing all of those text responses as well. If we're using the example of communication, we can say, okay, well, the research says that a communication audit might be best, or to streamline our communication platforms. But your staff are actually saying that it's these things. So start there before you move into coming up with all of these other ideas, or what your staff are saying is in alignment with research. So that would be a high leverage, high impact action for you to adopt in your school.
That's right. And identifying those pivot points just makes everything else make sense, I would suspect, rather than having the cart go before the horse.
Yeah, I think too that sometimes in leadership we can get so excited by the next bit of research or the keynote that we go to in ways to target an area. But I know, I was about to say I think, but I know that our staff in our school hold so much knowledge and understanding and understand the nuances of our individual schools that their feedback and input is not to be ignored. And if we're looking for key trends in what our staff are suggesting and we move with that first, it ensures that buy-in, our staff feel heard, and it means that our wellbeing approaches that we're adopting in our schools, aren't getting caught up in shiny object syndrome. We go, oh, that's the next best thing, or the school down the road did that, let's try that. Just, I think if we basically and very fundamentally and simply ask our staff what it is that's stressing them out, what they want, how we can improve things, and you go to that first, we'll achieve much better results and build a really positive school culture and environment built on trust and mutual respect and understanding of one another. I think the key and simplest part of this process is simply consultation and doing it well above any of the other fancy things, if I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Very well said. Very, very well said. So winding it back a little bit, what was the moment when you decided, I'm going to launch my consultancy?
Oh my gosh. It's just evolved so much over the years. My business did not look like this when I first started. So I guess the moment before the moment was when I'd been in education, maybe 12 years, and I'd been a school leader for the last 3. And to put it simply, I'd completely hit burnout, and my body was shutting down. So at this stage, I was only recognizing the physical ailments of my burnout. So I was covered head to toe in this really disastrous rash. I'd lost a lot of weight. My hair was falling out. And I was really struggling to engage with work. But the big standout for us, actually, and quite a personal note, was that my husband and I had struggled to fall pregnant, and I'd gone to a number of specialists, and nobody could actually pinpoint what it was. And it was finally I went to, sort of going to anybody and anyone to seek support, and went to a alternative health professional who was actually the first person who asked me about my life and what had happened to me throughout my years until that point, which is no doctor had ever asked me that. And I wondered why the appointment was an hour long, and it was so I could unpack everything from conception till then. And she just said to me, your life has just been constant trauma and chronic stress, and your body just doesn't feel safe to be able to have a baby. And that to me was, a bit earth shattering. I thought I was super resilient to have gotten through all of these things in my lifetime, lots of grief and loss, and, obviously working a really challenging role. And it was then at that moment that she said to me that I needed to learn some strategies in how to support myself, my health and my well-being, if I wanted a shot at this. And outside of that, I started to embark on the process of IVF to be able to have a baby. But I'm really glad that at the time I actually knew that, sure, I might get the baby, but it wasn't really solving this key problem that was happening with my physical and my mental health. So started on this personal development journey at 30, and became really inspired by everything that I was learning, and just how incredible I felt, and how much better I felt. And, month after month I was trying to fall pregnant and wasn't. But I noticed something as I developed these skills and started to learn about well-being and health and how to support myself, that I wasn't getting sadder. I was getting happier, and I felt much stronger. And that was when I started to realize that I was developing this true resilience. And people around me at school and in my directorate started to notice. And I said to my husband, because I was trialing all of these different habitual practices and skills, and, dabbling in journaling and gratitude practice, and ensuring that I ate really balanced meals and slept and had good sleep hygiene, all of these really foreign things. I was like, oh my God, other educators need to learn these skills, because I'm just feeling 1,000 times better and able to manage my job just by practicing these things. So I actually decided initially to become a health and wellbeing coach, because I was always really good at bossing people around and telling them how they could be healthier. That's why I get into consultancy. I'm more of a consultant than a coach, because I like to tell people what to do rather than to coach them to find out. I do a bit of both, but I'm definitely a better consultant. And I decided to learn to do that, and I launched my business. And really quickly, my books, but it was on the side job, obviously I was still in education, were full, mostly of people who worked with me and other people in my directorate who wanted what I had. I was turning into a completely different person. And so that's how it initially started out, was me doing this health and wellbeing coaching for personal wellbeing with educators. And then, as I said, as that started to evolve, my principal's like, why don't you develop these workshops on staff wellbeing and start presenting in schools? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I started to do that, and was presenting at my school and other local schools who I knew, and was getting really great feedback and loving it. And it was then when I actually set foot in a school that was very different from mine, or I didn't know them, and I presented on my beautiful wellbeing workshop. And I swear, I think half of the room wanted to pick up the chair they were sitting on and throw it at me. And I didn't get this warm reception. And I was shocked. I thought, excuse me, like everyone else, I got standing ovations, and they loved it, and they cried with me. But this school, they weren't happy. And a few people caught me afterwards, and that's where they shared with me that what they were experiencing in their school was less of a personal wellbeing problem for what they could recognise at that time. And they really wanted support with their workplace wellbeing. And it was at this moment that I recognised that schools actually need more than somebody coming in and talking to them about how to manage their own personal wellbeing. That is a very important part of it, and that is still an element of what I do. But some schools need a strategic approach that requires somebody, an impartial person, to work with them. And so this was there when I started to think about how I would do that, and lent on my Masters of Educational Leadership that I was doing, as well as my experience working in absolutely wonderfully led schools. So when I worked in these schools and they talked to me about the struggles they were having with their workplace wellbeing, I didn't understand that, because I worked under some excellent, very well-led schools. And so I thought, oh, well, these are the things that we do at our school to ensure that our staff have a wonderful sense of workplace wellbeing. And that then started to evolve into putting that into a model and a framework to embed in schools, as well as leaning on again, that excellent mentorship that I was under, and supporting schools to be able to do that in their spaces as well. So a long-winded answer to that is that the consultancy really came about when I recognized that wellbeing was actually more than our personal wellbeing, and it was more about workplace wellbeing. And people want advice, or schools really need and want advice on how to embed that. But the one piece that I recognized was missing in many schools was the development of our leaders, particularly our middle leaders and emerging leaders. I mean, we're all fantastic educators, but we are not upskilled in our ability to lead outside of the administrative. And that was something I was afforded in my school, as well as what I was doing in my own personal development and what I was doing in my master's. And I thought this just needs to be worked and packaged in a way that's more accessible to schools, from somebody who's walked the walk, talked the talk, and done really well to embed that in a school space. And so that's how I guess we landed on that initial development of the consultancy and my pivot away from that personal wellbeing focus into a workplace wellbeing lens.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that with me. Now, having been a part of well-led schools, I guess your strong belief to put people first, then pedagogy, would have actually been perhaps precipitated by that. Like, can you break down that core value for me, please?
Yeah, so that's a motto that I advocate for in school. And it didn't actually come from me. It came from a Dabrowski paper that I read, I think in 2020 or 2021 throughout the pandemic, which was really highlighting what we needed to be doing in schools to be able to support the wellbeing of staff. And so that people first then pedagogy is really an ode to recognising that, sure, our core business is education and the life and learning skills of children and young people. But those who deliver that and achieve that are the big people in our schools. And so, yes, our end game is educating our students, but I strongly believe that we need to support those who are actually doing that job. And I think that's very often a missing piece. And it's even, I think definitely schools think that way, but our messaging from departments and in school is never that as a priority. But education is a highly emotive and highly relational profession, where we're very prone to compassion fatigue and burnout, and really taking on the lives of the students and worrying about them long after we get in the car and drive away. But I always say that people first, then pedagogy, or at least doing them both at the same time. So recognizing that our strategic initiatives to support the learning, and all the NAPLAN results and the testing of our students is really important. But supporting those people in our organisation is going to have huge results on the outcomes of our students. And the research is really clear on that. Like I talked about before, it's not just about the wellbeing of our staff impacts the wellbeing of students and then leads to more enhanced learning outcomes. It also shows that morale, culture, satisfaction, relationships, workload management, communication, all of those things also impact on learning outcomes. So why not focus on the people in order to bolster the likelihood of our student results being enhanced as well, but also making our daily life, where we spend most of our time at work, more enjoyable for everybody, including the leaders. So yeah, that people first, then pedagogy is really a message that I'm certainly out there peddling all the time.
Fair enough too. Yeah. No, that's a very wise one, I feel, that's for sure. Because you can't obviously have schools without people, and people are made up of students and staff who are at so many different points of their own life's journey, and one year they might be receptive to one piece of knowledge or something like that, and one year the next. And it's I can only imagine the challenges that you face, where you're trying to present the data and offer avenues of not only support but more importantly direction. I can see that being a huge challenge, to have that encapsulate a whole organisation such as a school.
That's right. Well, it's just so interwoven and intertwined into other areas. And I think some people take it really personally, and I get it. Like, not all feedback and data is viewed by everybody as an opportunity for growth. It should be, and it is. But I even think back to the very first time I received feedback and data. It's quite a challenging thing because we can take it really personally, and it can impact our feelings of self-efficacy and confidence and all of those things. Whereas if we do really see it as that opportunity for growth and change and evolution, it's power. So lean into the challenge when I see school leaders getting that feedback and it really hurts. I can't do much more than sit with them in that time with those feelings and not hurry them along, because I've been there. I've been in that as a school leader and as a consultant. I've also had, really rumbly times where the feedback for me even hasn't been what I'd like it to be. But gosh, I'm glad I got it, because it's meant that the framework and the support that we offer and the messaging and, my boldness and my delivery has evolved and changed. So I welcome it all now. Not at the time always, but definitely later on.
No, absolutely. Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
With your consultancy continuing to go from strength to strength, can you tell me more of the renewed internal approach you and your team have been working on in terms of the framework and messaging?
Yeah, so as I said, our approach and the framework has evolved and continued to change and grow over the years. And so I guess the biggest thing that's happened over the last year or two is that my team has grown. So for a while in consultancy, it's like a one woman or a one man show, and you're everything. You're the marketing, you're the accounting, you're the administrative side. You're also out there presenting. You've got a research, you've got a network, all of these things. So that was just little old me for a really long time. And then in recent years, my team has grown from me to 6 of us. So I now have a data analyst on board. I have administrative assistants who support me with my content, actually, turning what I research and bang together into something that is that's going to land and that makes sense to people who are consuming it. I've now got an executive assistant, and I have another consultant working with me, and somebody supporting me with our writing our survey. So we've gone from me to 6. So on the back end, what we've actually had to build is processes. So I'll work with schools around particularly communication challenges for them around processes and understanding of roles. Whereas, when you start in these bespoke spaces, people just grow into their roles. But as you get bigger, people don't have an understanding of what the other person does and how everyone fits together. And also, if you want to retain people over the long term, you have to think about things like a vision and your plans over the long term, and taking on feedback and providing performance reviews. So the biggest thing that we've really been working on over the last year is developing our processes and our systems so that we're able to scale and work with more schools in a way that then not all of the information is just housed in my brain. So as you can imagine, I work with 20 schools currently at the moment, and I'm pretty good at being able to step into that school and be in that zone. But the back end stuff can't solely be reliant on my brain, because I'm also a mum. I'm a mum of a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, almost 2-year-old. And if we're only relying on my brain, my business would probably go under. So, with that, that's been a big focus, is on process. And what's really funny is that I work with schools and school leaders on these foundations. So on, workload management and communication and vision and direction, as well as developing people. And was great at doing that in education. And I still like to think that I'm really good at it, but I almost had to come back to the basics in my own business and apply all of those principles to what we're doing now. So it's really funny, because my team just laugh, because I'm taking them on this same journey that I'm supporting schools to do. So we're looking at personality styles and working styles and vision, and they have to, we're going through inductions and developing processes, but it means that we're able to deliver really high quality, high impact frameworks for schools, and do it in a way and keep everybody on track. And then outside of that, I guess those frameworks have developed over time to go from something that was like a survey, a few workshops, and then a post survey, to weaving in this guided inquiry and strategy calls, and everything needs to link together. So it's about ensuring that what we're doing isn't really bitsy and lots of little different bits of content, but it's taking our schools on a journey. Everything clicks in, and that's what our schools say at the end of, or towards the end of the program, like, I feel like this is a puzzle and everything's coming together now. And I'm like, yeah, initially it starts off like a can of worms being opened, or everyone's feedback's going everywhere and it feels really scary.
Absolutely.
And then we start to put it all in its place, work with it, put it inside our wellbeing action plan, and tidy everything up and document it in our framework, so that, again, it takes it from just all of this, once upon a time might have been an ad hoc approach to wellbeing, to something that's really structured and strategic, and that actually gets us to an impactful outcome.
Fantastic. No, that's very, very concise laying out there. I certainly do appreciate that. And I think even when we first started this chat, you touched on it before, where people who have the ability to fill out a form anonymously will often do so in a manner that's different than perhaps like a face-to-face catch-up with a leader or something like that within the school. And I can imagine the pressure and the immediate sort of self-reflection that would come from people who are receiving the data going, oh, this is a surprise. I didn't think it was like this, but you're there to not only provide a pillow, but also a whip to say, okay, this is our opportunity to move forward as an organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's normalizing some of that feedback as well. Like I said, that scanning phase, or when we survey and look at the data, was really raw. I always say it feels really blamey. I don't think blamey is even a word, but that's one that I use. Our staff are blaming the leaders, and the leaders are blaming the staff, and that's really normal. And it can feel really messy. But once we sort of then get all of that and we identify our priorities, we start to move forward strategically. And in education, particularly as leaders, we are very strategic. We're used to following a plan and moving along. We're used to a lot of change too. So that's a part of my job, is keeping us on the one track, staying on the path, and that's where a framework helps. Because otherwise, if you've got people who are on your wellbeing committee, all very well intentioned, can get caught up with the next best thing, or pivoting, or one staff member says this, so then they think, oh, that's what we'll do next term. But it's not. It's about looking at the trending data, staying on track, following an inquiry process, and landing at your end point, which is your wellbeing action plan, and sticking to that plan, which is getting you to your vision. So this is why vision is important, so that you don't get distracted by the noise in education that comes through every year. They change things, they change acronyms, we have to redo things, but we think, no, this is what we committed to doing. Let's come back to that vision, come back to our action plan. Let's stay on course, rather than getting caught up in the next best thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with that, that's for sure. Now, your motivation stems from a determination to provide positive and measurable impacts on schools. That much is clear, isn't it?
Yeah, when I was communicating my vision, as we did over the last year with my team, that really helps me get grounded in the kind of services that I offer. So I'm generally not actually a keynote speaker at events. Not that I don't think that they're impactful, but for me, I really like to see measurable improvement over a year, 2, 3. That really motivates me, and I think that's what schools really want too. And for me, it was about building this framework and this plan that got us to that point. So it's a real value for me to have an impact and to see it. So me getting up and delivering something one time, and a few people coming up and saying, that was really great, thank you, I took these things away, that feels really nice for me. But I really like to see that progress over time. And I think that stems from my work in leadership, when we would obviously each year have to fill out all of our strategic initiatives for the annual, our annual plans, our annual strategic plans, and reporting back on them. And something I noticed that resonated with me towards the end of my last school, towards my end of my career in education was that at the end of the year, our principal would say, okay, you were taking this strategic initiative, Adrienne, and you would mark off all the things that you did or your actions. And then you would have to put what you achieved. So what changed in your data or what made a measurable difference. And when we would then all sit down as a team, I noticed as a school that we were doing a lot of things, but we weren't actually having as much impact as we might like in some areas. So we definitely had impacts in lots of areas, but sometimes I just realized that we can be doing lots of things, but that's not actually having a significant impact. So from then on, my shift in taking on any strategic priority in my school, whether it was developing and implementing our coaching model, or whether it was, focused around a particular key learning area like literacy, or whether we're developing, assessment matrices or whatever it might be, I just wanted to stop listing only actions. I wanted that to have a big impact. And so when I moved into this work, I think that was why I developed a program that I did, because I don't feel satisfied in my work if I get to the end of that partnership program and that school hasn't made measurable growth in the perceptions of their staff, in the data. And then, of course, then that goes to translate on to student data. And listen, there's so many factors that actually impact that. But I feel like I've done my job when I leave a school and we do their comparison report from the first year to after the partnership program, or a midway checkpoint, and things are growing like that. That to me feels wonderful. And that's actually not all me. That's pretty much mostly the school, with a little bit of a nudge from me, helping them to see what they need to see in their data, stop getting hung up on things that don't actually matter, being that critical friend. But I'm only in there 3 or 4 hours a term. They are in there day in, day out, and they're doing that work. And that to me is having an impact, is really changing the way that leaders lead, and how staff see their leaders, and how staff contribute to collective wellbeing, talk to their leaders, communicate with one another, show up in their job. Like that to me just fills my cup.
Yeah, and you raise a very important aspect there again too, about like the welfare and the impact of staff. And I can only imagine the challenges that you would face when aiming to hit that staff wellbeing sweet spot. Can you highlight some of those challenges specifically, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think the first challenge that I ever hit was coming in with the personal wellbeing lens first. That just does not work. So what I do now, when I hit that staff wellbeing sweet spot, basically what that means is that it's that amalgamation of a staff wellbeing focus that focuses both on our personal wellbeing and our workplace wellbeing. So the sweet spot is right in the middle. It's working with both. So the staff really feeling as though the school acknowledges and addresses stresses and risk factors, but then also puts in place positive interventions to make the workplace something that's great and wonderful, and that considers and promotes wellbeing. So more than just, okay, well, your workload is a lot, so let's address that and streamline it somewhat. It's about then putting in place those positive interventions like coaching and mentoring and feedback and recognition, as well as, of course, having a good sense of meaning and direction, whatever that might be. And then the flip side of that, of course, is our staff's personal wellbeing. So them knowing and understanding that their wellbeing is actually made up of 8 different interdependent dimensions. So that includes their workplace or occupational wellbeing, but also includes other things like their personal wellbeing, their social wellbeing, financial wellbeing, spiritual wellbeing, and so on, as well as their ability to cope and manage with stresses, risks, in those inevitable challenges that happen for us on the day-to-day. So the staff wellbeing sweet spot is really the amalgamation of those two. And so my approach now focuses heavily on the workplace wellbeing space, at least initially. So we hang out there first, and I think that really shows our staff that we're being consultative, that we're listening, that we're following through on their suggestions and their feedback where possible, or letting them know when we can't actually action their feedback, which is totally fine, and that's all in transparency. I think staff would appreciate hearing that we can't action a suggestion rather than total radio silence, which is what we'll tend to opt for because we struggle to have that difficult conversation. So we start in that space and then start to embed some of those positive interventions and start to make some decisions and considerations with staff wellbeing in mind. And then towards the end of the partnership program with me, or I think once we've satiated that somewhat and staff see it and they feel it and they recognise our efforts as a workplace, then we start to talk about personal wellbeing and their contribution, both in what they're doing in their personal life and how that impacts work, but also how they contribute to workplace wellbeing. So leaders can be incredible in their decision making and roll out so many different initiatives and change their plans and make strategic decisions that have the amazing power and influence. But if our staff aren't buying into that, and they're not willing to let limiting beliefs go, and they're not willing to put like their team and the whole group in front of, some of their own things that they're dealing with, then that's going to have an impact on everybody else. So that, I think, is that important strategic initiative or direction that we take, is that real focus on workplace wellbeing, then swooping in when staff are ready to talk about personal wellbeing. And that lands much better. We always get much more buy-in. So I say to schools, there's a method behind the madness. I'm sorry it feels like you have to do so much in the beginning, but that's how, in my experience with 60 schools, that's how it works the best.
That's right. And you highlight an important point as well, which would only help augment the buy-in, is with your level of transparency with both staff and the leaders, telling them straight out, or okay, don't actually have an action prepared for this, going to have to go back and look at the data and see what's happening. People who receive that feedback would definitely get a sense of, I'm not just being ran through a one-size-fits-all form where behind your book, Adrienne, you've ticked C and D and everything like that, and then here's your answer and stuff like that. That would certainly help prevent that feeling, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And, I was working with a principal the other day who they had a flexible working arrangement in place, and it had been established for a couple of years. It was like a Flexi Monday or something, and it wasn't working. It had gone away from its initial iteration or how it was established. And staff were celebrating how much they loved it. And he said to me, I feel really nervous because I don't think that it's actually working. I've got lots of staff now treating other days like a flexi day and going home, and I feel like we've lost control of it, and I don't know how to address that with staff. And I said to him, like, my advice to you is to preface the conversation that you have with, I find this conversation really hard, if I'm being honest with you, because I know that it might potentially upset or worry people, or people might get their guard up, but I'm truly having this conversation because I want what's best for everybody, and we need to find some kind of equity here. So I want to have a conversation about how those Flexi Mondays are working and whether maybe they might need a review. What are your thoughts? And he was just I remember he said to me, like, yeah, I think sometimes you think you have to be so formal and so prepared in those conversations. I'm like, but we're humans. Difficult conversations, I think if you lead in with, I might totally butcher what I'm about to say, and I'm really worried about that, but I might need a second to correct myself afterwards, or please don't take this the wrong way, but this is what I need to unpack with you. And that conversation went really well. He said that they talked about it and a lot of other people agreed, and they came up with a few possible solutions before maybe they need to get rid of that option. And in that way, it starts to communicate those gentle expectations and standards and that vision that we have, and sort of course correct culture before we need to come in with like hard rules and code of conduct and all of those things, which is what we can do. But that transparency, I think, is just so important. Like, people often misconstrue vulnerability for weakness, but vulnerability comes out in our transparency. Like, I wish that we could give you a teacher's aide in every space or for all of those key students, but this in fact is how our funding works, where and I watch my principal do that brilliantly when I was at school, when my team were calling for more support assistance. And I always passed that consultation on, whether I knew it wasn't going to get over the line because we were already at budget. But I let him know in my check-in with him, my staff were talking about how they're looking for more assistance in the classroom. I know that you can't give them that, but I just wanted to let you know. And he was so wonderful. He stood up, he goes, are they still down in that meeting room? And I said, yeah. So he stood up and he walked down and he got the whiteboard out and he explained how the funding worked to them. And he said to them, do you know how many assistants we're funded for in this school? And they went, no. And he said, 6. He goes, do you want to know how many I employed? And they said, yeah. And he said, 15. So he said, I am pulling money from this bucket and this bucket to give us more people than what we're actually allocated for. So I'm really sorry, but I can't give you any more assistance. And they never asked about it again, but not because they were silenced, but because they understood.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what we need to offer our staff, is a bit of perspective, if we talk, like we were talking about that before, and understanding of things that they don't have. Because if we don't give them the narrative, they make it up for themselves.
That's right. And the other end of the spectrum too is that if you're not prepared to offer the transparency tied in with the perspective, you run the risk of making a decision behind closed doors where to staff, it just looks like there's been just a total binary 1 to 0 course correct, where it's okay, we're not doing this anymore as of this date, we are now doing this. And that can cause like a huge culture shock in an organisation, and regardless if it's a school or not.
Yeah, there's no why behind that decision. And I think communicating the why behind any decision is just a quick communication thing that we practice. And I do it with my team. So I'll say, I'm going to get you to do this, Liv. It's my assistant. I'm going to get you to do this. And it's because in those staff sessions, things haven't been very clear. So I then need you to make this presentation or this PDF so that they get it. So it's just explaining the why behind the task or the decision or where we're pivoting. And we did that today. I've just been sitting down with my team, talking them through what I actually do in my partnership program, because on the back end, they're doing all this admin work, but they don't know why they're taking notes on that session or why they're typing this up. And I explain all of the staff are providing this feedback, the buzz in the room for an hour where everyone's offering insights and agreeing with people, and we're capturing trends and data. So you having to hand type up a lot of that stuff comes on the back of a really powerful session, and it enables me to then go back to the school and say, here's the trends in what everybody was saying on that day. So it makes it more succinct, and the school then doesn't have to sift through numerous responses. They just get the key takeaways. So it might feel arduous to you, Liv, sorry, but it means that my schools are going, right, this is what staff want, and we can start actioning that straight away. So everybody's little part in that process leads to that big impact. And I want my team to feel like every annoying task that they have to do that I no longer have to do is contributing to the greater good, and they're supporting that process as well. And our staff want to feel that in the school. They want to know the why. They want to know why we've pivoted. They want to be able to offer quick reflection on that, and we don't have to stop a staff meeting and go, what does everybody think? We can just let them know our plans, give them a QR code for a way that they can share some feedback. You can do a drop-in session. There are so many ways that we can consult with our staff that don't involve a town hall meeting where the loud staff talk the most, but everybody feels like they can contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. And like understanding that, in addition to so many other factors that set you apart, one of those is your 6 steps to becoming a well-led school framework. Can you tell me how each step ties into the next, and the importance of real data, and just as like providing a QR code for being able to provide a resource or an avenue for staff who have just participated in a meeting to be able to actually share some real feedback without sort of having to agree with the loudest voice in the room, as you so eloquently put, because I think we've all been in situations where we know that, oh, there goes that person, he's about to get his voice heard, and here we go. So yeah, just wondering with those 6 steps, how does each of those steps tie into the next, and how that has a real big priority with the throughput of real data?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. So this is so fresh in my mind because I was talking my team through this today. Again, going over my approach with them and how the 6 steps and the framework has been developed. So the 6 steps to becoming a well-led school ultimately is the framework that we follow inside the Well-Led Schools Partnership Program. And I'd like to say that I came up with every step on my own, but I didn't. The steps are actually drawn from a couple of different models, many different models actually, and lots of evidence-based practices. So the 6 steps typically follow a spiral of inquiry. So I've mentioned that word inquiry a few times, and that's because our staff wellbeing framework is a guided inquiry into staff wellbeing and school culture. So the Timperley spiral of inquiry was actually developed to inquire into student learning needs. And when I was sitting through these PD opportunities when I returned from mat leave after my first son, Ruben, my mind was in the wellbeing space because I'd started to develop this on the side. And I was sitting and I was listening to these different inquiry phases and basically a blueprint for keeping our staff focused and, again, not getting caught up in shiny object syndrome and inviting this consultation of our people in regards to student learning needs. And I went, we need to do this in a staff wellbeing space. So the phases of the spiral of inquiry are important because they lend themselves to my 6 steps. So the first phase is scanning. So that's initially it was asking what's going on for our students, but I'm going to talk about it in a wellbeing space, staff wellbeing space. So it's what's going on for our staff. So this is where we look at multiple data sets. We let the worms out of the can and we start to unpack, okay, how are staff faring, what's going on, what's everybody's feedback. So putting that all out on the table, I kind of envision it like bits of paper flying everywhere and everyone's scrambling around trying to work out what's happening. From here, once we've looked at all of that, we move into the focusing phase, which is where we identify our 3 priority areas for focus. So in a wellbeing space, we might pull out 10 different themes that are impacting staff, but then we ask our staff if we could focus on 1 to 3 priority areas, what would they be? And these need to have the most impact because we can't do it all and do it well. We can't be a jack of all trades but a master of none. We really need to identify strategically what we'll focus on. So that might be workload, communication, student behaviour, let's say. From here, then we develop a hunch. So we go, okay, well, how might we, the professionals, be actually contributing to these challenges and what we're experiencing? And so that is us as a leadership team and also staff. And these are the strengths as well as the areas for focus. So once we develop a hunch and go, if we're talking about student behaviour and that's impacting staff wellbeing, maybe we actually don't have a consistent policy that's applied right across the school. So yeah, as a leadership team, we're all doing different things across the school and that's confusing our staff, making them frustrated. That's impacting morale, satisfaction, relationships, let's say. So from here, let's test our hunch, moving into the next phase, engage in new learning. So what do we need to learn about student behaviour or our communication or leadership to be able to refine that and get better? And in that learning, what are some actions that we pick up from this deep dive into these key priority areas? So if it's communication, we need to learn about how to effectively communicate. And then we start to go, well, the research and our staff are telling us this. So then we start to squirrel away or learn or develop some actions that we document in an action plan and we trial. And then the final phase in the spiral of inquiry is to check in on our progress. So we should just spin round and round in that spiral of inquiry for any strategic initiative at any time. Like I said, it's a whack-a-mole. Constantly new things will come up. We have to pivot and change. So with that in mind, I then crafted the 6 steps to becoming a well-led school. And this then also pulls in other key areas of wellbeing research, leadership research. So we start off step number 1 in my well-led schools partnership framework is to scan the school. So I've stolen that from Helen Timperley. Thanks, Helen. We scan the school, we look at those multiple data sets, and then at the end of that process, we choose with our staff the 3 priority areas for focus. The next step that we move into, which is really important, it's actually part of the focusing phase, is to establish a culture of wellbeing. So that means that our staff recognise that wellbeing is part of what we do. It's a part of our school. It's in our messaging. We promote it, we support it, we encourage it. But beyond lip service, we have established a vision, a strategic vision for staff wellbeing and school culture. So I work with a school to identify in 3 years' time, this is where we want to be. This is how we want our school to look, sound, and feel. This is what everybody's doing. These are the success criteria that we're able to achieve. These are our goals. Here are the roles of everybody in that process. And here's exactly how we forecast that we're going to do that. So if we then come back to our priority areas of workload, communication, and student behaviour, we go back to all of that amazing feedback from our staff in the scanning phase and go, all right, in relation to student behaviour, we've heard you've talked about the inconsistency. We're going to streamline and systemize our approach to student management across the school. So we're sort of satiating a bit of a need for some of our how staff, the ones who don't actually just love a vision statement. I love getting caught up in the emotion of a vision statement, but not everybody does. Some of our more analytical thinkers want to know how we're going to do that. So again, we outline that for them. So that's a second term of work. That's a very in-depth process that we do inside the partnership program. And then when we've got that clear, our staff know that we're serious. We're committing to something, but also they're hearing those gentle expectations and standards. So this is a bit preventative here, in a sense where we start to talk about what's everybody's part in this. We go, oh, right. So our leaders are saying that in order for this to happen, our staff have to actually follow those student behaviour management frameworks. They need to contact home or maintain those relationships with families, let's say. So we're starting to send a message, but it also is giving a little bit of a lay of the land and something to anchor to in possible future conversations, which might be corrective or coaching or even celebratory for our staff. So this is building a really positive culture. So they start to flow into them there. After that second term of work, we step into the phase where we agree on the joint responsibilities of staff wellbeing. So after we've done a lot of that initial work, identifying what we can do as a school, we start to transition into the term where we really explain to our staff, these are the roles of the leaders in how to change school culture and evolve how we support wellbeing. But you, the staff, play a part in this too. So if we go to that, one of the key roles of a leader in a wellbeing conducive environment is to offer multimodal opportunities to consult with staff. And you'll sort of hear in the work that I've already covered, we're building that vision with our staff. We're scanning with our staff. They are involved every step of the way. But our staff need to recognise that if they want consultation that lands, they have to provide professional, respectful consultation and feedback that's helpful, solutions focused to their leaders. Let's say that's just one of them. So our staff start to recognise here the part that they play at work, but also this is where we start to talk about the influence that our personal wellbeing has on how we show up to work, how we connect with our students and the community, and then the impact that has. And as I said earlier, they're more primed to receive that message well when they've seen and felt that the school's really taking their workplace wellbeing seriously. They're much more likely to buy into that process. And it's also a bit of a review. So we look at those joint responsibilities for leaders and for staff. We reflect on our strengths, maybe what's already in progress since we started the partnership program, or just generally, and then what we could continue to focus on. And this helps us to pull out then what I was alluding to before, those positive interventions. So beyond just addressing stresses and risks, do we have a coaching and mentoring model in there? Staff won't always say that we need that, but we certainly need that. Do we have a great goal setting and reflection process? Do we have a strength identification model and where we all work with our strengths? Again, no one's going to put their hand up and say that that's what we need, but those certainly build on culture and a positive working environment. So here we can start to go, all right, this is what the research is saying about how we build a positive culture, and that we can weave that into our plan. Step number 4 is upskilling leaders and staff and evidence-based ways to support wellbeing. So if we come back to that spiral of inquiry, that's that new learning. And part of that phase 2 might be engaging in new learning in relation to our priority areas. So if we've identified workload, our leaders probably need to develop their skills in organisation, project management, streamlining workload, reviewing our assessment schedules, reporting, whatever that might be. But our staff might need some support in priority setting boundaries, organisation, working within their most energetic times of the day. So here's that joint responsibility work. We all play our part. And as we're engaging in all of this new learning at every step in the framework, we're picking up possible actions. So from the feedback and consultation of staff, but from our learning, and me, the guide and the facilitator inside this, squirrels all of those ideas and actions away into a draft wellbeing action plan. And that's the final step, the final major step inside the 6-step framework, even though it's step number 5, is to finalise and tailor and embed that staff wellbeing action plan. And that is prefaced by our vision. Our vision is where we're going. And the action plan is what we're planning on doing to get us to that endpoint. And so this keeps us on track. It maintains accountability. It means that all those great ideas that we discuss in every staff and leadership development workshop or coaching strategy doesn't just come out of our mouth and flitter off. I write everything down, and it's so funny. Our principals will say, when did we say that we're going to commit to do that? And I said, in the scanning phase, you said to your staff that you would review the meeting agendas to address their workload. So you've made that commitment after the scanning phase. So let's come back and address that, because that's something that we can action over a term or get everybody aligned with. That will have a really big impact. So I know the value of documenting all of that work and having somebody like me to remind a school, because I can't tell you how many sessions I sit in where so many amazing ideas come out. And if I wasn't writing them down, they go into the abyss. And so I can see how that can be frustrating in schools.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't think schools are isolated in that phenomenon either. I don't think so.
No, we have to be very organised with writing down these strategic steps and then breaking it down, not getting too caught up in only documenting actions and not actually following through. It's a big focus of what I'm doing with schools now at the moment is I'm not going to let you keep writing down ideas. You need to get a role on acting on some of these things so that some of your more cynical staff see and recognise that you're actually doing something about this and you're not just talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you've got to have some sort of action coming out of all this, because otherwise it's just a big merry-go-round and no one really wants to buy tickets for those, especially when your main business is education. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So to become I think we touched on this before too, and I think it's worth highlighting in more detail. To become properly immersed in a school's culture and environment, you partner with them for a significant period of time, don't you?
Yeah, 12 months generally,
12
sometimes longer. Yeah. So sometimes I'll partner with a school for a term just to complete the scan process, and they might feel equipped, like they can go on their way actioning once we identify their priorities, going, okay, yep, we feel like we can focus on those areas and begin to address those, but generally a 12-month period or longer if, our time doesn't always allow us to work within those termly allocated times that might need to extend out.
Yeah, so do you have any specific parameters that you get a feeling inside your soul where it's like, oh, this might actually have to go outside the 12-month normal period? Do you usually have any sort of tells or anything like that where consideration for that might be needed?
Yeah, listen, my support is generally the 12 months. So what I'm really good at, as I said, is capturing that data, reviewing it, diagnosing, providing those with that really foundational level of knowledge and understanding for the leaders and for the staff. And then once delivering that action plan, in many ways, sometimes I have to pass that baton on, particularly, as I said before, wellbeing is a beast. So it can be intertwined into so many different areas. So for example, I have a really good level and understanding and ability to coach and support and provide PL on communication. But in some schools where communication, let's say in conflict management, is a huge issue, I am actually probably not the person to continue that ongoing work to develop communication skills and conflict resolution, strategic initiatives and processes and practices. So I try and stay in my lane in that space. So as I said, I'm good at providing that baseline level. We get great results. And then a school might need to run down an avenue of that strategic initiative with a person best suited to that. So student behaviour is another one that is huge in schools, which requires definitely, and student behaviour and wellbeing, somebody who is highly specialised in that. So working with a consultant or a professional in that space who can help you there is generally what I'd recommend. And I stick within those things that I'm an expert on and particularly specified and have my expertise there. But generally, a larger school too might need a little bit longer. So I'll work with schools who are multi-campus. Let's say they have junior, middle, senior. That's a tremendous amount of data to look at because we break it down across all of the different subgroups. So sometimes that takes a little bit longer, and you also have to think of the logistics of getting 500 staff together. And a workshop session with 500 staff isn't going to work. So we have to break that down into different subgroups. So that can always take a little bit longer, but it's better done in those smaller group capacities.
Absolutely. You would be proud, wouldn't you, of the boldness and bravery of you and your team display when having to have the hard conversations, because no one really wants them, but regardless of want, most times they're certainly needed. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think when I started in this space, I wasn't confident to call out maybe something that a staff member said or a leader said. And maybe I also just didn't have the experience and the skills. I've worked with thousands of staff now and I've heard it all. And I hear those common trends and the common perspectives that many share. So I think I'm certainly proud now in comparison to 5 or 6 years ago when I started, as to the things that I'll call out. And my schools will say, I love how you called that out. When a staff member says something, I'll say, hang on a minute, we're actually talking about something that's a system issue, not a school issue. I want to bring us back to what we can do at school to improve that. We can't change school funding, we can't change the demographic of our students, whatever that might be. So I'm a lot more bold in that space. And I always say to my husband, it's exciting to think where I'll be in 5 years or 10 years, with more schools and years of experience under my belt. So I'm certainly proud of that and how far we've come. And also, for the culture that I've built in my team, for them to be able to be bold with me and call me out. And I bring on people to really shine a light on their expertise. So my data analyst, Mohammed, I think I know data. He knows data and he knows computer and system. And so, being just brave enough to call on external people to come and support you and build you up and take your business to another level. Also, it's really bold not to know the answer. I think that I wish more leaders would do this. And like I said before, I stay in my lane in some things rather than saying, oh yeah, I'll get back to you, and then running away and trying to research on a topic that isn't my zone of genius. I think it's always important to build our skills, but I'm quite open and happy to, as I said, pass the baton on to somebody who's really great at what they do, and then bold enough to, I guess, refocus those people who are standing right in front of me on give them a little bit of perspective that they are not as lucky or fortunate as I am, because I've worked with so many schools to have. So offering that to them in a way, I think, that lands humanely is really good.
Perfectly understood. Now, speaking of humanely, I guess, every sector with education especially had challenges post-pandemic. What key themes and findings have you seen personally emerge since? And I suspect that mental health is a big factor.
Yeah, so actually throughout the pandemic, I was tasked with developing and delivering a 2-day conference to some principals in in Victoria. So they were the hardest hit throughout the pandemic, a long period of lockdown and a long period of home learning. So really those in Victoria and Melbourne in particular were, I think they're most impacted in Australia, at least, relating to the pandemic. So when I was tasked with putting together this conference, it was actually on what the research was saying in relation to how to support staff in the pandemic and post-pandemic, because something that, wellbeing was gaining traction long before the pandemic took off, but really from that first lockdown, it totally changed education, as well as staff perceptions and staff self-efficacy and how staff view themselves, and also how the media speaks about education and teachers and teacher wellbeing as well, and kind of haven't really been able to let that go. And it still is a big impact, but I just think the narrative in the media only perpetuates the negatives and doesn't always focus on the fact that we are in the most purpose-driven profession there is, and there's so much positivity and the rewarding nature of it, but I digress. So coming back then to this conference, I was looking then into the research, and there was research coming out daily from right across the world that was exploring teacher narratives, what teachers were looking for. And I apologise for saying teachers. I wish there was more work done on administrative and support staff, but it's always on teachers and leaders. And 6 key themes actually came out from the over 50 or 60 papers that I dove into. And I actually presented on this at this conference and have continued to, because the research continues to mirror those key themes. So the first theme that you put to me before was certainly that it's around normalising mental health and wellbeing amongst our staff. So from before the pandemic to now, staff stress, burnout, anxiety, depression has absolutely gone through the roof. So more of our staff are struggling with their wellbeing, mental health and physical health now more than ever. So we need to normalise it, and not normalise it and sort of welcome it and accept accept every person's perception of it. Though all of those things are really important. What I mean by normalising it is giving our staff, promoting to our staff that they can talk about their mental health and wellbeing at work, that we support them, making it part of our conversation so it's not stigmatized, because the research really shows that a number of our staff are struggling, but they're not actually talking to their school about it for the fear that it will impact them at work. Yeah. So, and I'm really conscious of talking about that, because while I am so impassioned by wellbeing and mental health and our support of that, I also am a practitioner who is very realistic in the fact that I also talk about maintaining schools' excellence and high standards and our level of professionalism. I'm not saying that people with a mental health struggle aren't professional, but I think it's important to keep that balance of having high expectations and developing our people, but also supporting their mental health and wellbeing. And we need to be conscious that we don't fall into a trap either way, where we're really focused only on excellence and not on wellbeing, or so focused on wellbeing that we don't actually manage our people and help them to succeed and do well at their job and in life. So I'm just mindful of that. So that's the first theme. The second theme is ensuring consistency and clarity in our communication to our staff. So one of the big things that came out in the pandemic was staff felt a lack of control over, being able to leave their house. And a lot of that came from governments and lockdowns. And also this shared sense of not knowing what's going on. Like every day was different. And so in a nutshell, what that has created is more of a need for our staff to have more involvement than they ever did before. So they're actually calling for more consultation, involvement in decision making than they ever did. And I see principals going, why do they want to be involved in that? They just used to let us run with that initiative and deliver something, but gone are those days. So we've really moved away from that top-down leadership, highly instructional, to staff wanting more involvement, so more of that focus on transformational leadership. So that's a big theme, is to offer those multimodal consultative opportunities for our staff, but also to close the feedback loop, ensure that they're updated on where their feedback's landed, and have a really strong sense of the school's direction and priorities and where we're going and vision for all key strategic initiatives. So that's a big thing that I teach. The next theme that's emerged, of course, is to reduce and streamline our workload. So we are just trying to do 1,001 things, rolling out new initiatives, and a lot of the time we're short-staffed, don't have enough people on the ground. People are away because they're burnt out, and we're also not leaving any time and opportunity to develop our staff. Like we've moved, no coaching, no goal setting. So the research really calls for us to review and streamline that. So cut back on things that aren't a priority, come back to the things, a narrow focus on what really matters, like our students and our staff and community, social and emotional wellbeing, trauma-informed practices, student behaviour management. So in schools where those things aren't an issue, sure, like all of the strategic and curriculum focused initiatives we can run and roll with. But if you don't have basic classroom functionality, then those things are just, you're just running your staff down and they're going to leave. So the research really calls us to come back to basics. And my last school did this really well. We were all about getting our kids to school, focusing on the functionality, a love of learning, and then from there we'd gradually build on other things. But I don't understand some departments' initiatives of rolling out so many different data collection and changing the curriculum and all of these things when we can't even get our students to engage. I just think it's just distracting us. So that's what the research is saying, and that's what I'm also advocating for in schools in that space too.
Well, that's it, and that's the incredibly important service that you provide too, Adrienne, where you're able to extrapolate what the data says, because there's nothing worse than, like, you do see it a lot in newspapers or on online platforms or anything like that. You will often see a slab of data that's pasted in the middle of the screen. It will be given zero context, but you can be sure as heck that it's being positioned towards enhancing the poster's argument for or against something, isn't it? So being able to deal with, as you've said numerous times in our chat, real data and being able to extrapolate that and be able to get meaning and direction from that is absolutely everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why when we're looking at these themes, we then link it back to the data. So I'll say, you got this school, you're actually doing well in relation to workload. So we talk about that theme, but we don't spend too much time there. But as we move through the other themes, they're common. It's coming out in the research. This is what a lot of teachers and school staff are really struggling with. And so let's hang out in that space a little bit more. And this is that, that learning piece of the inquiry is when we develop a hunch, we then spend more time learning about that key area that's linked back to the requirement or the need of the school. And, there's so many other themes that coming up, and I'll buzz through them because I'm mindful of the time, but there's that really big focus, and I sort of alluded to it before, on our staff sense of professional identity. So that got lost throughout the pandemic because we went to home learning, and we talked about at the very beginning of this call, we had to go become IT savvy and, deliver what we used to be really good at in person online. And I sucked at online learning. Like I couldn't put together anything super engaging. I worked with 6-year-olds. Like they were not doing that work, their parents were. And so I was watching my team, my staff, feel like they were failing, and they were and they took that really personally. So that just had such a huge impact. But in that time, so that happened, we developed our sense of self. Then we've rolled back into this catch-up mentality, and many states have gotten rid of teacher development plans, goal setting, coaching, mentoring. There's no time because we're so in the operational, we're short-staffed. Student behaviour's through the roof. So we're not connecting with our staff as leaders like we once did to develop them and build their capacity and build trust and really hear them and check in. So there's a big focus around coming back to that. And I think that that's just one of the most undervalued wellbeing initiatives that we can apply, is sitting down with our staff and learning about who they are as a professional, who they want to be, how they think we can get them there, and who can support them and what their goals are. Like just those basics. I think if you just do that with your staff, you're like, miles ahead of so many others. And then finally, that final piece around rebuilding relationships and community, or building it at all in our school. So the focus on social relationships, connection with our community, again, beyond just things that are online. So getting our community and parents and students in, we're humans, we're social beings. So we have to get our 6 hours of social contact every day. And if we're not doing it at work, we're likely not doing it. And teachers and social connection to their student isn't the same as adult to adult. So we have to be mindful of that. And then finally, that ties into probably the biggest theme in all of the research at the moment, which is on that collective staff efficacy. And, according to Hattie, that is the leading determinant on student learning outcomes. And it's true. A PLC approach, action research, inquiry, like what we're doing, working together, properly collaborating, having a scaffold there so that we work together well rather than just all being in a room together. We're actually collaborating to ensure our impact, like I talked about before, is so important on our school and on our student outcomes. So 6 key themes still there post-pandemic to now, slightly nuanced with the next focus on how we can evolve and improve things, but 6 key themes that all schools should know and understand.
Absolutely. Now, going on from hunches and real data, excitingly, you are working on offerings specific to student wellbeing and behaviour. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was mentioning that before. My my last principal was excellent at what he did, and he was an absolute gun at student behaviour and wellbeing and rolling out positive behaviours for learning, restorative practices, really helping schools to systemize their approach. And I've noticed in my work that I'll go into some schools and, before they can even actually fathom talking about staff wellbeing, their wellbeing in relation to their safety, student management, the basic classroom functionality, that's almost like this barrier. If that's a stressor, they can't even get past into thinking about teacher development, reducing workload. Like that is the thing that's impacting them the most. And as I got into this work, I just kept seeing that coming up in so many schools, not all schools, but a lot. And I thought, before I can even get in there and do really great work, or at least at the same time, that needs to be addressed. And like I said, I have to pass that baton on. I've got good knowledge and skill and understanding because I worked under his incredible leadership. But I thought, okay, I almost need to have this second arm of the work that we do, where we develop an action plan around that space and we really systemize and streamline things to support staff wellbeing, so that then I can come in and do my job well on that focus, more specifically on staff wellbeing. So we're actually piloting a program to support that now. So we've worked with a number of schools right across the country, and I've tweaking and tuning that, and we're getting great results. I actually had my first 2 schools come through after the year and seeing just such great improvement in wellbeing, morale, culture, perceptions that stressor is being addressed, that initiative is working. So I'm so proud to see that coming through. So that's something that we're almost at the end of refining in terms of, again, developing that action plan and providing ongoing coaching and support to actually bring together what schools are doing in relation to student behaviour. A lot of the time schools are actually doing everything. They have all of the right models and things in, but like I talked about before, consistency is lacking, or maybe the coaching of the staff to ensure that certain elements of the student behaviour plan is actually being implemented across the school is lacking. So Rob, who I work with, Rob Lands, he always talks about how that's almost like the glue, all of those little decisions that we make, like adapting our timetabling and how students are managed during playtime when they're off the playground. Those are all the things that actually make the difference. So he's supporting schools in that space. So yeah, that's going to be the next arm of the work that we do, is having our well-led classrooms, partnership programs running, as well as my well-led schools for staff wellbeing.
How very exciting that is. Yeah, congratulations. That is, it sounds absolutely exciting.
Yeah, well, I like being his boss now. So I used to call him boss, and then now I'm his. So the tables have turned.
Very good. To me, it sounds like a truly inspiring initiative that you're both sharing. So that is, magnificent.
Oh, yeah. People sort of say they love seeing us together. And I think it's like we worked so well together in school. So it's nice now to continue that work. When we do our podcast together, people just always love the vibe. So it's great to have one of your really close friends working alongside you. And he supported me through my leadership development, and now we're doing business together. So that's awesome. That
is really, really awesome. One thing that isn't so awesome, I guess, is that it's hard to sort of wrap it, I guess, but you support the MIST Foundation. It's an organisation that raises awareness for missing persons and those who are left behind Can you speak more to that, please?
Yeah, so one of my best friends, I think we're almost at 20 or 25 years, Claire, she has not seen her brother Anthony since 2013 when he went missing. And I'm really proud of Claire. I'll probably try not to cry, but I'm really proud of Claire because she actually hasn't ever talked about Anthony, even with her friends. And at the moment, she's actually raising awareness and funds for him by running in the Huskisson half marathon. She's got 2 little kids, and she's being really brave to not only run that sounds like that run sounds hard, but to actually begin talking about Anthony and processing her feelings. I'm really proud of her, and I really want to acknowledge just how strong and amazing she is. I'm going to cry again.
Yeah, no.
Because I think, again, that vulnerability and bravery to tackle something head on is really important for our wellbeing and mental health. And Claire shared that people who losing somebody who's gone missing is something that's really hard to process. I know that a good coping strategy is acceptance. And I actually think that that's one of the hardest things to ascertain. And when someone goes missing and you don't know where they are, I think that that's really hard to accept. And so it will always have an impact on you and your family, and it's so far reaching. So I think that an organisation like that definitely needs more funding, so that we can continue to raise awareness in the word that there are lots of people out there who are missing, who haven't come home to their families, and being able to support those families and their loved ones in that space is something that's needed, because they're often silently suffering while they're waiting to find their loved ones. So a big shout out to the Missed organisation, and even bigger shout out to Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Adrienne, very well said, and very, very brave all around for having to highlight that, because me personally, I would find it borderline impossible to even imagine thinking of being in a situation like that. So yeah, certainly my heart goes out to everyone that is affected, obviously to those who are still missing, but those, as we've highlighted, those who have left behind. So thank you very much for sharing that. It's just so very important.
Yeah, and thank you to Claire for raising all of that money. I hope she raises a lot of money.
Yeah, that's
Everyone
right.
Go find it. The Missed organisation, go and donate.
Yeah, we can help raise the money, but I might leave the kilometres on the road to her.
Yeah, me too. No, thank you. Not doing that.
What is the best way for people to reach out and keep up to date with you, Adrienne?
Well, my website has absolutely everything on it, from articles, podcasts, resources, everything about my partnership programs, and more about my incredibly amazing team. So that's adriennehornby.com.au. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there just looking up Adrienne Hornby. And then my email, of course, you can find it on my website, but it's hello@adriennehornby.com.au. I'd love to hear from people who've taken something away from today's conversation, or who have any questions and would like to learn more. I also offer a free training about my framework and the approach that goes into a lot of detail into the nuts and bolts of everything. So you can sign up to that on my website. There's lots of different time slots available for a time that suits the person wanting to engage with me, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, I, for one, absolutely in awe of our conversation today. I'm sure that we could have kept going on and touched so many more topics, and hey, maybe we will in the future, but for now...
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. But for now, Adrienne, thank you very much for being on the Schoolyard Cast. It's been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I've loved being on, and incredible questions, and I loved the reflection piece before jumping on today, to really think of the things that I was proud of and celebrate my team and how far we come. I think alongside being interviewed, it's really great to look back and think on how much you've evolved and the strengths of yourself and your team. So this has also been an amazing process for me as well, outside of the conversation, as well as preparing for it. So thank you so much.